back to Pope Hadrian. He tries to write a clarifying letter that is not what this is meant. That's a poor translation. This is what it really means. But the suspicion of East and West is just add a little bit more onto the pile here, because at this time, and this is when Charlemagne is now on the scene, and this is going to be an even bigger issue. Again, political, nothing to do theologically, but politically will have a big consequence. There are 22 disciplinary canons that come from this council. The bishops decreed acceptance of the apostolic canons that decrees the 6 previous ecumenical councils and certain local councils. One interesting thing that was pointed out here is that ecclesiastical appointments made by princes were declared invalid. There were a number of canons directed towards bishops. They were to know the entire book of Psalms or the Psalter by heart. I'm not saying that they still know this. They were to read the canons of the church and the sacred scripture and live and teach the commandments of God. They were forbidden from extorting anything from monks or clerics. So no heavy-handedness there. Once again, the archbishops of the church were reminded that they were to hold a synod annually. It seems like every time there's a council they have to say this, which kind of indicates they didn't do it. Simony, the sale of office, right? The sale, if you pay me so much, I'll ordain you, or you pay me so much, I'll name you the bishop of this diocese. If you pay me so much, I will. The sale of sacred things was again condemned and outlawed. Clerics who were ordained on account of their generosity to the church. So there's a difference between simony, if you pay me, I'll ordain you, and those who are very generous to the church and the bishop ordains anyway. Were warned not to despise those of lesser means. Here's an interesting one. Bishops who consecrated church without relics in them were to be deposed. So the importance of having relics within the church. Bishops and abbots were required to have stewards of their residences and monasteries. They were not to have women in their service and not to alienate the property of their institutions. Clerics were warned to remain in their own diocese, to dress with becoming modesty, and eat with women in public and private only in cases of emergency. So I guess this is a case of emergency. Clerics were forbidden from serving 2 churches in Constantinople, so you couldn't be the pastor of 2 churches in Constantinople, but that practice was allowed elsewhere. Those who were not ordained were forbidden from reading from the pulpit. So the pulpit's reserved for the reading of the gospel, right? And that's done by the bishop, the deacon, priest, or even bishop. Canons regarding monasteries required that those that had been converted into public houses were to be restored. That new monasteries must have the requisite funds before beginning construction, and that double monasteries of women and men were to be forbidden. I guess they didn't work back then either. Monks and nuns were warned to stay in their own monasteries. Jews who had been forcibly baptized back by Leo III, Emperor Leo III, and were Christian in name only. So they did it just to stay alive, but they didn't practice and they didn't have any interest, they didn't believe. They were to be excluded from the church and this practice was to cease, basically. Their children were not to be baptized, and they were forbidden, interestingly, from holding slaves. Finally, all iconoclast books were to be submitted to the Patriarch of Constantinople. Now in the West, this council, like I said, because of that faulty translation in one part that seemed to equate the veneration of images with that of worship of the Holy Trinity, it was not well received at first. It took a while for the clarifications to straighten things out. And that difficulty between East and West, so this happens in the year 787, right? And there is this ongoing problem with those Lombards, those Germanic tribes, Arians, not Catholics, who are very violent. And Charlemagne comes to the Pope's rescue and Pope Leo III crowns him Holy Roman Emperor on December 25th, the year 800. This is a really thorn in the side of the East. It becomes a real big thorn in the side of the East, because that is their title. He has no right to take that title from them. That is their title. So that is and from the Western point of view, you're not using it. You're not protecting us. We're going to give it to someone who will. So it doesn't turn out too well. In the East, the acceptance of Nicea II, the Second Nicea, follows the fortunes of the emperors themselves. So Irene, who is a very devout iconophile, is not the best administratively. And her son, when he comes to full maturity, he has her sidelined